Welcome to PCR 2026. My name is Marty Leon, and I'm a structural cardiologist, and I work at Columbia University and the Cardiovascular Research Foundation in New York City. I am here with Roberto Scarsini from Verona, Italy, who presented a fascinating late-breaking clinical trial at PCR dealing with the very important topic of how to manage patients with severe aortic stenosis and concomitant coronary disease. So Roberto, maybe you can explain this interesting meta-analysis to us and explain some of the methodologic and study design issues.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. So we conducted an individual patient data meta-analysis, including all the trials available at the time that we did the study, randomizing patients with coronary artery disease and severe aortic stenosis to different management of coronary artery disease. So we had patients treated conservatively with medical therapy, patients who underwent angio-guided PCI, and patients who underwent FFR-guided PCI. So overall, we including 1,050 patients from the activation trial, the Notion 3 trial, the FAITAVI trial, and the TCW trial. The patients were divided in two groups. Patients who underwent an original randomization to PCI. There were more than approximately 700 patients, and then patients who were treated with medical therapy, 350 patients approximately. And the PCI group were also divided in FFR-guided PCI, 400 patients, and angio-guided PCI, 250 patients.
Mm-hmm. So Roberto, this was a very interesting study. Many of the individual trials are a little bit smaller. So usually when you have many small trials, it's a good idea to put them together into a meta-analysis. This was an unusual meta-analysis for two reasons. First, it was an individual patient level meta-analysis, which is always stronger. Second, it involved multiple different therapy combinations. So some people would call this either a multi-layered or a network meta-analysis. But still, it gives us some insights into some of the common trends that we're seeing in the management of these patients. Can you share with us some of the findings of this study?
Yes, sure. So at 1 year, we observe a significant difference in terms of MACE. So the primary endpoint was the composite of all-cause mortality, MI, any revascularization and stroke. And patients who underwent PCI or were randomized to PCI had a lower rate of MACE compared to patients treated conservatively. This was marginally significant with an hazard ratio of 0.7. And the benefit of PCI was largely driven by fewer unplanned revascularization rather than harder endpoints such as mortality or MI. But we still observe that the trend for a lower rate of MACE. Mm-hmm. We also had a co-primary endpoint, which was the combination of ischemic events and bleeding events. And this co-primary endpoint was no statistically different between the two groups. When we stratified the revascularization strategies, we observed that FFR-guided PCI was actually associated with a larger benefit compared with medical therapy alone and compared with angio-guided PCI alone. So there was a significant reduction in both MACE and NACE for patients treated according to the FFR guidance. So I think that was a very interesting finding and some kind unexpected for some.
So there were some strengths, and there are also some areas that are softer areas in terms of interpretation. The modern trend is to do less PCI in the setting of AS and in severe coronary disease. And you were able to demonstrate that there is a marginal benefit of doing PCI, which was significant, and it was largely in terms of repeat revascularization. Now, the endpoint was only a year, and we all know if we're going to start looking at hard endpoints, like reduction in ischemic events or cardiovascular death, we need more patients and followed for a longer period of time. So it's not unexpected that we would not see that in this kind of meta-analysis, but it confirmed the current clinical trend, which is a good thing. And it also, at least in my mind, it reasserted another recent trend, which is it's not enough just to say it's a significant lesion. Being able to demonstrate physiologic significance with something like FFR strengthens your judgment in terms of what patients to treat and how to treat them. And it seemed in this exploratory analysis in some of the trials that that was another strength, to be able not just to do PCI based upon angiography, but to have the additional power of physiologic assessment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And if you see the curves, the curves, they diverged at 1 year basically, and probably they will continue to diverge at longer follow-up. And this is true particularly for patients treated according to the FFR.
So if you were to construct an algorithm about how to manage patients with severe AS and CAD, what would that be?
Well, if patients are treated according to the current standard practice, so most centers still do angiography for assessing coronary artery disease, I would say that in the intermediate range of diameter stenosis lesion, it is reasonable to use FFR as indicated by the guidelines for the coronary syndromes, that at least the FFR is not indicated for patients with aortic stenosis. But I think we have enough data now to see that our value of FFR is reliable also in patients with aortic stenosis for the vast majority of the lesions. So I think using the FFR before TAVI, it is reliable. It is true that in a small proportion of patients, when you have a borderline physiological value, it is reasonable to reassess the patient after valve implantation with another FFR or with other tools. So I think in most of the cases there is no rush to put a stent in a patient undergoing TAVI, and you can take the time to assess the functional significance of the lesion. But you should do that. I think it is important. It is an important message that emerged from this study, that cardiologists should still assess the functional significance of coronary disease in TAVI patients.
So to try to conclude in terms of understanding this study and how it applies to clinical practice, it's very clear that the trend is to be more of what I call a minimalist trend in terms of the management of concomitant coronary disease, unless, of course, you have a patient with an acute coronary syndrome associated with AS. So there's no rush, there's no urgency to go ahead with very quick PCI. If you do PCI, you probably shouldn't do it before or during the TAVR, but should wait to do it after the TAVR. Being able to demonstrate, certainly if it's an intermediate lesion, that it's physiologically significant would be an important point to guide whether or not you need to do PCI. And the idea that we used to think of complete revascularization of all of these patients is no longer current in terms of the clinical practice, where we generally treat epicardial coronaries of greater significance, don't treat as much branch vessels. And also, this is a meta-analysis. So these findings and these trends, I think, are exploratory. I think it gives good guidance to a practitioner, but we always need more data. And there are large randomized trials that are ongoing, and we need to continue to have extended follow-up to look for changes of ischemic events that might occur later in those patients that might have been deferred.
I think you're absolutely right, and we need more data in this field, and we will have it in the near future.
So it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Roberto. This is really an important study, and I think you described it beautifully. And I want to congratulate you on this contribution to PCR 2026.
Thank you very much.